the odds that Harden gets dealt soon? We keep talking about it every day on this show, I feel like.
That's funny. It's like, man, what a bright spot James Harden's been. Let's see where he could go next. James obviously has a history of being in playoffs, not being in the play-in tournament, and more specifically to this Clippers team, not being in situations where he sees it declining sharply and he gets the heck out of it.
The Clippers just hit rock bottom, and James Harden's name is suddenly all over trade rumors. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. The real reason behind these moves has nothing to do with what you've been hearing. Multiple teams are circling, wild trade packages are floating around, and the truth about what's actually happening? Way messier than anyone's admitting.
The Clippers are really bad. We know this. Everybody has known this for weeks now, but they have reached a new level of bad. Prior to this, it was, oh, well, they're only a couple of games out of the play-in. Some of these other teams are going to fall out of the race, and then they'll be able to creep their way back up. Nope, they are basically the New Orleans Pelicans this year, give or take a win or two. And the Pelicans are, by everyone's estimation, the biggest disaster in the league. And both of them share the we don't own our first round pick thing between the two of them. And I bring all of this up to say, I think it is more likely than ever that we are going to see a fire sale with the Clippers when it comes to James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Zubac, and I think the most likely guy of all those players to be traded would be James Harden, because one, he's playing the best, and two, I think there are actually a handful of teams that you could find that would convince themselves that James Harden would really help them this season.
Real talk. If you're the Clippers right now, are you actually blowing this whole thing up, or are you delusional enough to think you can still save this disaster? Let me know in the comments, because this gets way more ridiculous than you'd think. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off. The LA Clippers are really, really bad. Not struggling through a tough stretch bad, not waiting for guys to get healthy bad. They're legitimately terrible. And everybody's known this for weeks now, but they've somehow reached a new level of pathetic that's almost impressive in how spectacularly they're failing.
Who you wanted to play through, how you wanted to play, what's the challenge of trying to integrate those guys, different guys into how y'all want to play offensively right now?
Challenging. In what ways? Every way.
For you, I mean, you've been one of the great floor raisers that this game has ever seen. How is it more challenging than some of the other situations you've been in where you've been able to raise that floor?
I don't know. I can't call the last situations or whatever. Like, the situation here is just difficult. We're not, not making shots offensively. Defensively, we allow things that the game plan mistakes. We allow that to happen too many times. So it's just one of the reasons why we lose games.
Before this current nosedive, people were still holding on to hope. Oh, they're only a couple games out of the play-in. Some of these other teams are going to fall out of the race, and then they'll creep their way back up. Nope. Wrong. Dead wrong. They're basically the New Orleans Pelicans this year, give or take a win or two. And the Pelicans are, by everyone's estimation, the biggest disaster in the league. Both of them share that fun little detail where they don't own their first-round pick. So they're losing games and helping other teams get better picks. That's just chef's kiss level dysfunction. And I bring all of this up to say, it's more likely than ever that we're about to see a full-blown fire sale with the Clippers when it comes to James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Ivica Zubac, the whole crew. And of all those players, James Harden is the most likely guy to actually get traded. Why? Two reasons. One, he's playing the best out of all of them right now. And two, there are actually a handful of teams that would convince themselves James Harden could really help them this season. Whether that's true or not is debatable, but the delusion exists, and that's what matters for trade value.
You've seen before when he left OKC, like OKC never made it back to the finals until last year. He leaves Houston, they go on a 3-year run of the worst team in the league. Leaves Brooklyn, you see where they're at now. Leaves Philly, you saw Philly last year. You see the Sixers or the Clippers this year. I would say that because he and Kawhi are healthy, I think those talks are not happening right now. But it only takes, another stretch of losing 15 out of 20 games, which is what they started this year with, to have reality set in and say, like, you're playing this well and you don't only have so much time. And those talks could happen, I would say, MLK weekend. So I anticipate James being on the Clippers with Kawhi and helping them trying to turn this thing around as guys get healthier. But if they are like 20 games under 500, then I do think that both sides would mutually agree to look and see how to make the most out of a horrible situation.
At this point, if you're the Clippers, sure, maybe you still have a mathematical chance of making the play-in, but there's zero indication that's actually going to happen. Maybe when you get Derrick Jones Jr. back, things get better. But let's be honest, there's nothing that tells you that's the case. Nothing. The pick you're going to lose is gone no matter what. That's not changing. You only really want Harden and Kawhi for one more season after this one anyway, so why not just cut your losses now and move on? Which brings me to some James Harden trade possibilities. And before we get into specific teams, there's a couple things you need to know about Harden trades. First, yes, he does have a big salary, around $39 million. But relative to some of the other guys we talk about leading up to the trade deadline, it's actually not that difficult of a number to match. It's not $50 million or $55 million like we'd be talking about with someone like Anthony Davis, so it's a little more viable. And the other thing is, relative to some of these older veteran guys, James Harden is genuinely playing out of his mind right now. He's playing extremely well. So there's actual value here beyond just the name recognition. Teams would be getting a guy who can still produce at a high level.
They are desperate for anybody in the backcourt to be healthy. I mean, like, Sidi Sissoko is out there, like, creating offense for them. It is brutal. Drew Holiday's hurt. A bunch of other guys are hurt. And they came into the year thinking they wanted to try and make a push for the play-in. Now, a lot of things did not go according to plan in Portland this year, but that's another story. For Portland, I thought about them as a James Harden team because of their desperate need for guard help and because they do actually have some salaries that would make this work.
The first team I came up with is one that's needed a guard for literally months at this point, the Portland Trail Blazers. They are desperate for anybody in the backcourt to be healthy. I mean, Scoot Henderson is out there trying to create offense for them. It's brutal. Shaedon Sharpe's hurt, a bunch of other guys are hurt, and they came into the year thinking they wanted to make a push for the play-in. A lot of things did not go according to plan in Portland this year, but that's a whole different mess. I thought about them as a James Harden destination because of their desperate need for guard help, and because they actually have some salaries that would make this work. The problem is, they don't really have a trade construction that works one-for-one with just the Clippers because of who they'd have to give up. So the trade I came up with was a 3-team deal. Kyle Kuzma, Matisse Thybulle, Anthony Simons, and a lottery-protected first going to the Clippers, James Harden going to the Blazers, and the Milwaukee Bucks getting Jeremy Grant. The reason the Bucks are in this is because we've gotten rumors and reports that they're going to continue trying to add pieces around Giannis for whatever reason. They're still trying to convince him he should stay, and Jeremy Grant has been a name that's been mentioned in those discussions. So they go ahead and add him. They basically give up Kuzma and not much else to upgrade to Jeremy Grant. The Blazers, as I mentioned, are in desperate need of guard help. They probably see themselves as a pretty solid team by 2027 anyway, so giving up a lottery-protected first guards you against some kind of catastrophe. You're giving up Jeremy Grant, who's got this giant contract for the next couple years, and you give up a late first-rounder, and you get James Harden. Maybe that allows you to make a push toward the play-in, which has been a stated goal for them coming into the season. The Clippers get some expiring contracts, they get Kuzma, who could actually be something useful, and they get what will probably be a semi-late first-rounder in exchange for James Harden. You can just move on. You get yourself some draft capital and start focusing on the 2026 and 2027 LA Clippers. You don't have to worry about the Harden situation anymore. I think this is a trade construction that makes a decent amount of sense on paper. The two things I could see going wrong are Portland just not wanting James Harden in general, or not wanting him at this price even though they want to make the play-in. Giving away a first-round pick, even with lottery protection, probably isn't exactly what they have in mind for basically a rental of James Harden. And you have no idea if Harden actually wants to go there either. How does all that work when some of their guards actually do get healthy? It's Shaedon Sharpe and Harden and Scoot Henderson. That's just a lot of guys in the backcourt. Right now, they need help because of injuries, but once those guys come back, it gets crowded fast. The other issue is, as much as we've gotten reports that the Bucks want to trade for someone like Jeremy Grant, whether that actually happens remains to be seen. We could just have a Giannis request to trade situation happen way before the deadline, and then none of this would matter. I also want to briefly mention one more thing with the Bucks, because I brought this up about a month ago. The Bucks could potentially just trade for James Harden themselves, separate from this three-team construction. It would be Kuzma, Bobby Portis, and a first-rounder going to the Clippers for Harden. If you're the Bucks, even if you think it increases your chances of keeping Giannis happy, you're trading away 2 rotation guys and a first for James Harden. That doesn't seem like a great idea, but I did want to mention it's still a possibility if they get desperate enough.
Okay, let's move on to James Harden. James Harden moving to the Minnesota Timberwolves. The package that would be coming back to have James Harden playing beside Anthony Edwards, would that work? The package would be Naz Reid, Mike Conley, Rob Dillingham, a youngie there for the oldie Clippers, and Joe Ingles. Now, this can't be done till January 15th, and Minnesota would have to sign 3 players because that's taking a lot of guys off their roster.
Another team I really wanted to find a James Harden trade for was the Minnesota Timberwolves. Your first thought is, okay, who needs a guard? Minnesota definitely does. They've been trying to solve the guard alongside Anthony Edwards problem for a long time. Whether you think James Harden is a good fit for that is up for debate. The problem with Minnesota is no matter how I tried to make it work salary-wise, they would have to give up some combination of, or all of, Naz Reid, Dante DiVincenzo, and Mike Conley. Those guys, salary-wise, unless you want to trade away like 8 players, have to be in the deal. If you could just do Conley, DiVincenzo, and some other stuff, I think maybe they'd consider it. But having to throw Naz Reid in there as well doesn't really make sense for Minnesota. He's been too valuable for them. If you're not doing that version, you'd have to trade away either Julius Randle or Rudy Gobert to make the money work. And I don't see that making sense for James Harden at this point. So I wanted to make it work for Minnesota because the fit makes some sense on paper. But unfortunately, I just couldn't find a deal structure that didn't gut their rotation. The last team I want to talk about is a little bit of a wild card. And honestly, it would be hilarious if this happened. I'm kind of rooting for it just for the chaos. The Golden State Warriors. And you already know who's going to be in the trade, right? Jonathan Kuminga is obviously going to be in the deal. A couple other salaries like Moses Moody, and then DeAnthony Melton and Gary Payton II are in there because I needed like $5 million extra to make the money work. You can pick 2 other guys at the end of the bench, Trace Jackson Davis, whoever you want. The Warriors send all that to the Clippers and they get James Harden. And that's an interesting kind of middle ground for Golden State between we need to add another star and we need to trade away Jonathan Kuminga, but it's not Anthony Davis and it's not Lauri Markkanen. They can more easily get to the salary of James Harden without completely destroying their depth. And frankly, it's hilarious to consider a backcourt of James Harden and Steph Curry on the floor at the same time. You've got Draymond and whoever they want to put at the 5. It's a real possibility. It's something they could actually do. The Clippers get Kuminga out of the deal, and they can have him as some kind of future piece, and the rest of it is basically just matching salaries unless you really like Moses Moody. But I was kind of surprised when I went to make a Warriors trade because I assumed there wasn't going to be a way for them to trade for Harden without giving up Draymond Green, which just doesn't really make sense for them. But it's actually a possibility. It's something they could legitimately do. But here's where I've really landed with all of this. Unless that Portland 3-team trade construction somehow comes together, which still feels unlikely because, no disrespect to the Trailblazers, I don't know that James Harden sees himself in a Blazers jersey. Unless it's that deal, I feel like the Clippers are just going to keep him, because they still see some kind of delusional path to maybe making the play-in and salvaging the season. They're thinking about the difference between where they are now, which is potentially giving the first overall pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and where they could be if they made the play-in. Maybe they give OKC the 14th pick or the 17th pick instead, and they still made the play-in, which was kind of their expectation before the year started. My issue with that thought process is what I outlined at the beginning. That is an unrealistic view of what this season has been so far for the Clippers and the product that's been on the floor. I understand Kawhi's been hurt. Kawhi's always hurt. That's kind of his thing at this point. Derrick Jones Jr. is hurt. And you made mistakes in the offseason by not re-signing guys who could help. This team is just not good enough, and they don't feel like a team that's going to recover. We're talking about having to make up 6 games on some of these other play-in teams. And yeah, that doesn't sound like a lot when you have 40-plus games left, but it does sound like a lot when that is the literal number of wins the Clippers have had so far. 6. They've won 6 games. And they're losing to teams they have no business losing to by margins they have no business losing by. I don't understand the concept of keeping Kawhi and keeping James Harden just for a chance at the play-in. That's not a plan. That's desperation disguised as hope. But the more I looked at these trades, the more I think that's probably exactly what they're going to do. They're going to hold on to everyone, convince themselves they can turn it around, and then watch the season completely implode while Oklahoma City gets a top 5 pick that should have been theirs. And that's the real tragedy here. If this breakdown made you see things differently, hit that like button and subscribe, because we're breaking down all the messiest NBA drama the right way. Drop your wildest trade idea in the comments. And remember, sometimes the biggest disaster is pretending everything's fine.